Hi everyone, welcome to Chalchitra Talks. मेरा नाम वाणी है and in this episode I want to talk to you about my problem with Haruki Murakami's Kafka on the Shore. So in the month of Feb, we picked up Kafka on the Shore for a book a month with Vaani, where we pick up one new book for each month and we read it together as a community. I picked up Kafka on the Shore majorly because I had read a lot of short stories of Murakami, but not a novel, and I was dying to do so because I honestly loved his writing in the short stories. And B, a friend of mine had recently gifted me Kafka on the Shore, and I was dying to read the book because I had heard so highly of it. Anyway, we picked up Kafka for the month of Feb, and I was taken aback and thrown into a box full of surprise. And I was so happy to read Kafka on the Shore because it was unique the way it dealt with personal dilemma. There were two worlds that were running parallelly, and they only ran on the understanding of metaphors in a way. And I also liked how it made me feel so confused and weird. And that's why when I finished reading the book, I remember texting vaibhav, hey, I finished it and you better finish it as soon as you can as well. And immediately after that, I gave it 4 stars on Goodreads. A few days later, however, I found myself a little underwhelmed, and I think that was because my love for Oshima subsided a bit and then I could see a little more clearly. And there were a few things that just did not make sense to me. And I found myself very confused with my feelings towards the book. I still think it's one book that you should pick up anyway because it is the perfect introduction to magical realism. But there were still a few things that just did not sit right with me, especially how he treated his female characters. There were 2 female leads, and I thought there were places where I just could not connect with them, mostly because there were a couple of statements slash comments that were in the book about the female characters that just do not add to the narrative. And I felt that for most of the book, Murakami used the female characters only as a prop. And that does not only happen to females. I thought it happened to Nakata as well. Because at the beginning of this book, he was such a nice old man. And I really liked him. But over some time, his chapters just became a little monotonous. And I felt the only reason why they were being written were because you needed a parallel chapter to the story of Kafka. This also brings me to the fact that I hated the character arc of so many characters. You start connecting to a character and then it just becomes another character that just does not feel real to you. And this brings me to the point that I almost hated the character arcs of so many people in the book. It just felt like Murakami struggled to write a couple of characters, especially the female characters, and you just could not understand where he was going with them. Not to mention the incest was insufferable, but also upon skimming the book once again, I realized I was not a fan of Kafka. He just felt like a teenager who has had a recent revelation and he goes on and on about it just to prove the world that he's right, which is actually the basic plot of the book. But I'm also aware, and I came to know and understand the book a lot better once I learned about Oedipus Rex, which is a tragedy of Athens. And it's about a young prince called Oedipus, and he's born to a king and queen. And there's a prophecy that the young Oedipus will one day kill the king and marry his widow and make love to her. And therefore, the king asks a shepherd to take him to the mountainside and kill Oedipus. But the young shepherd obviously pities the young Oedipus and gives him to another shepherd who gives him to another king and queen. And there, young Oedipus grows up and learns about the prophecy. And he's immediately filled with guilt and he does not want that prophecy to come true. And so he leaves that kingdom, travels to his old kingdom, kills the king, and marries the widow of the king, who is his mother. And Murakami's Kafka on the Shore is loosely inspired by Oedipus Rex. And that's when I realized what Kafka was trying to do. But I still couldn't understand what the heart of the book was. And that's my biggest problem with Kafka on the Shore. I just do not understand where the plot is headed. and where you should focus on. So this was my problem with Kafka's Murakami on the Shore. But having said that, I still love the book so much. I think it's a great introduction to magical realism, and there are certain plots and certain parts of the book that just feel so right and they connect to you. Mostly because it is a coming of age story of an individual who's trying to find his own identity. He's road tripping and he's trying to make sense of the entire world, which I think a lot of us are trying to do. So, despite all my problems with the book, I still think it's a beautiful read. So, this was my recommendation for this week. If you haven't read it already, like most of us who have read it in the month of Feb on A Book a Month with Vaani. But before I go, I want to tell you that you can support us on Patreon or join our YouTube community and become a patron. We have carefully divided our patrons into 3 different categories: Goodfellas, Gladiators, and Godfathers. Godfathers are at the top, and we treat them like literal godfathers. They have access to our streams, they can join our quizzes whenever they want to, and we even introduce them to projects that we haven't launched yet for the wider audience. And we even have regular town hall sessions with them, and it makes for an absolutely beautiful community, especially on WhatsApp, where we have exclusive groups dedicated to books, music, and movies, and Godfathers get access to all 3 of them. So, if you like our work, do support us. It would mean a lot to us and it would help us sustain ourselves a lot better. And I will be back with another recommendation for you.